right, guys, welcome back. I am here to do some more asks. There's just a few comments that I want to go over on YouTube, and then we'll hop over and we will do some asks. All right, so this is from the last video. Adding to the smoky scenes, in Still, there's a moment where Daryl accidentally gropes Beth while he's grabbing her to shoot that walker. Yeah, I remember that. I can clearly remember that they even joked to Norman and Emily about it later on Talking Dead. Not sure it was there, making a bigger deal than it was. LMAO. They could have deleted that scene, but they left it in as is. I didn't even notice it at first watch, yet they made sure to blow it out of proportion on TTD, and people think they didn't mean to make Bethyl romantic. Sure. No, I like that. And it seems like I've heard Norman talking about it too, like not just people joking to him about it, but him joking about it and saying he accidentally grabbed her boob when they were doing that. So yeah. But that's a good point. I hadn't really thought of it that way, that it's another example of a story that they specifically told in order to bring out the romance. Like, yeah, for sure. I like that. We have some replies here. They didn't mean to make Bethel happen according to the naysayers, and yet a lot of the cast and crew were open about shipping it. Strange. Yeah, and I mean, obviously anybody can ship whoever they want, but it's like the people who did ship it, like Lauren Cohen comes to mind, they were actually giving interviews about it and saying how cool it was and that they were enjoying watching this unfold as an audience member, not even just as a cast member. Um, so that was being pushed for sure. Um, and it maybe is a little bit of a different topic, but I've mentioned this before, but Shaniqua Martin Green, there was commentary on the DVDs for the episode 510 Them. And she's the one who confirmed a lot of things like that the walker in the trunk that Maggie found was meant to be Beth or, symbolize Beth. And that when Daryl fixed the music box, she did this thing where she went, "Oh, he fixed little Beth. How cute." You know what I mean? So again, confirming that the music box is meant to be Beth. And it was like, too, that she thought that was so sweet and so great. And it's like, I don't know if they would have necessarily emphasized all of that or allowed her to talk about that if it wasn't meant to be a romantic thing, right? All right, and the next one, yes, so strange since where I'm standing, Bethel was clearly set up in 4.1. I remember the first time I watched that scene where Daryl goes to her jail cell and she looks up at him after her sweater falls off her shoulder, not platonically. And I stood up out of my seat and literally said out loud, "Oh my God, is he going to kiss her?" LOL, I started shipping them right then and there. People who claim their dynamic is sibling coded really worry me at times. I was gonna say, I love that you say her sweater falls off her shoulder, not platonically, because there is a platonic and a not platonic way for a sweater to fall off a shoulder. It's true. But yeah, totally. I remember seeing something, I think it was on Pinterest, just something somebody pinned, it was the Bethel hug. So of course that's why I was looking at it. But the caption said, not that I blame her, I'd do whatever I could to get my hands on him too. So it was just kind of this goofy little thing. But yeah, I mean, again, I really think it's only the naysayers who don't like her and don't like them together and are absolutely horrified by the idea that maybe she'll come back and she'll actually be his soulmate that say things like that. Because to the average person in the general audience, yeah, this was really obvious. All right, next one. You were correct by nursing home. I meant the Vatos gang. I work with senior citizens, and while I haven't watched the first few seasons in actual years, my brain did remember there being elderly that the Vatos gang was taking care of. That my brain just decided that was a nursing home. Well, thank you for clearing that up, and we don't actually know what happened there. R.I.P. Vatos crew. Yeah, cool. I don't think that they shot some of season 4 with 3 because, at least as far as we know, S4 had not been written at all yet. I would say another explanation for the much shorter filming time of S4, in addition to Emily having shot things elsewhere at other times, could be a heavy emphasis on flashback material, such as stuff like the missing 17 days. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility too. Um, I don't know that I believe season 4 wasn't written yet. Again, I think they plan way further in advance and they like to tell us that it's not written yet. And it could be true that the, actual screenplays have not been totally finished yet or that sort of thing. But when it comes to the larger events of the story, I think they know several seasons out. So, like, when did Gimple admit this? I want to say it might have been season 9, although it might have been earlier than that too. He once famously said he had through season 15 of The Walking Dead planned out. Now, obviously, it ended after season 11, but he had through 15 planned out, and now he has splintered that into different spin-offs, and now it does look like they're coming back together again. So the point is, this is exactly why it doesn't make sense to say that they decided to kill off Beth's character in 507 and then killed her off in 508. No freaking way. I mean, they plan so much further ahead than that, and they never change anything unless they absolutely have to, and nothing else can be done, right? And that was definitely not the case. Emily didn't want to leave. There was no reason to kill her off then, right? That doesn't apply. And the only thing I think that would change it is if there was something where they couldn't shoot what they wanted to, or there was a legal issue, or if you have an actor that's demanding to be let out of their contract, so they have to change things up a little bit, those sorts of things. Then they might have to change. But again, none of those apply to Emily. So that's the only thing I would say is that I don't think them not having written season 4 yet is a thing. I don't think that factors into it, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. It definitely could be Emily having filmed things other places and relying on flashback material. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I do agree with you there. So thank you for all of those comments, guys. I really appreciate them. Let's hop over and look at some asks. All right, Obadala 2. So Daryl Dixon, as of 10/24 or 25, again, this is an older ask, appears to be on another filming break. In fact, the Spanish crew may have wrapped entirely, though we don't know that 100% for sure yet. But Norman was pictured with several Spanish crew members at a party at a bar, and one of the sound mixers posted on Instagram that's a wrap. I'd be shocked if the whole season wrapped already, though, perhaps only the Spanish crew wrapped, which kind of opens all kinds of interesting possibilities. And on 10/27, Emily reappeared on social media promoting her cameo, where for Halloween she is going to be dressed as a vampire nun. Just thought it was very interesting and funny to say the least. Sure. Yeah. So we do know they've wrapped now, and I don't know if they had fully wrapped when this was sent in at the end of October. But yeah, totally. I agree. And I think this whole um, I almost feel like this whole thing where he runs into the military and is taken prisoner by them and all that, this stuff they keep leaking, it almost feels like a whole different story. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Spanish crew did or didn't work on it, but I feel like we're going to have a closing and ending to the story that was told in season 3, and that it's going to be continued in season 4 with the Spanish town and everything that is involved in that story. And then I feel like this military thing is going to be the next iteration, and we really may not get it until the end, until the last episode, but that's just going to show us what's going to be happening next, right? And it's interesting because I do believe that that is what Diverged was pointing toward. It's what Diverged was foreshadowing, and we're just now getting to it. So yeah, and then the vampire nun thing is definitely funny. Like, no idea if that's a hint, but I kind of hope it is. So thanks for sending that in. All right, questions for you and your fellow theorists who are so good with details. Are all of these baby Daryl flashbacks from after his mom died in the timeline? I saw someone unrelated to Bethyl elsewhere online saying that Zabel had messed up because he had Daryl, Merle, and their dad living in a trailer instead of a shack, like Daryl said he grew up in Still. But if it's after their mom died or it burnt down, obviously they had to move at some point, right? Maybe this is just bitter antis trying to make Zabel wrong on everything because he isn't doing X other thing they want. I know everyone's been trying to nail down when the flashbacks are, car posters in the background, etc. The season of TWD Daryl Dixon, but I was curious if you had any thoughts on this. I don't have anything super specific. So right off the bat, I do want to say that, maybe this is splitting hairs, but they're totally splitting hairs. Like what you said about them being bitter antis. I think it's either bitter antis or just people being trollish on the internet, because people will always nitpick everything and find what's wrong with it, right? So maybe I'm splitting hairs here too, but Daryl didn't say they lived in a shack. He said his dad had a place just like this. And by that, he meant the state that it was in and what it looked like and all the junk. You know what I mean? Like, didn't necessarily say it was a stack or a shack or a trailer or a mansion or anything like that. He just said he had a place just like this. Um, Now, if it was full on had a still in the back, I mean, that does suggest something that, is not a trailer. So I'll give you that. But either way, I think they're really nitpicking. And I got news for you. I can nitpick right back. But even if, say, that, maybe Daryl did mean a shack that his dad had, yeah, I mean, it could be before this, it could be after this. That could be, when Daryl was a little bit older, when he was a teenager, and the last place that their dad ever lived. He did not give a timeline for that. And, people can live lots of different places growing up. So I wouldn't say that Zabel is wrong. Uh, I don't know. It wouldn't even bother me that much if they changed the mythology a little bit on this to make it fit. I know that there are other people who don't like that, and I will say that Gimple rarely does that. I mean, it would be very unlike him to do that, but it actually wouldn't bother me all that much. So, um, who's? I guess we're assuming that this is after his mom died because we don't see any sign at all of a mother. But yeah, I would assume. I mean, if the house burned down, then obviously they wouldn't be living in it anymore. They would have to live someplace else. But as I said, also the shack thing, like the Moonshine Shack, could have been years later too. It's not necessarily that they lived in a Moonshine Shack type house and then that house burnt down and then they lived in the trailer. I mean, that could be. Or it could be the opposite of that. They lived in the trailer and later lived in the shack. You know what I mean? So we don't have enough information to really nail it down. And so that's why I don't really have much of an opinion. I'm kind of waiting for them to tell us more and to get more information so that we can nail it down at a later point, right? But either way, I'm not terribly bothered by this. And I think it's funny that people online are. It's like, who cares? Is that really all that you're getting out of the show? That one of the flashbacks doesn't line up with what you thought it should? Like, do you realize there's a lot more going on in the show than that? So, yeah, I don't have a really hard and fast theory on this. I'm just waiting to see what else they are willing to give us. And either way, it's not going to bother me that much. So hopefully that helps. Thanks for sending that in. Okay, Granny TWD. I love the bit of a deep dive into Daryl's psychology, and I love it when you let us in on the conversations with your peeps. You give us so much insight, and then when you share the other perspectives, we get the whole picture, or at least a whole theory. I love that Norman is going to get to dig deep to act out his feelings. If we get to see the depth of his struggle through the years, I will willingly wait another season for the reunion with Beth. Seeing his emotional mental journey will give us so much more context to that reunion. One more thing, is it possible Daryl is not getting a haircut, but has a bit of hair shaved to tend an injury? And wouldn't it be something if that was Beth's hand? The finger under his chin seems kind of awkward. Is that his hand? As always, big thanks for all of your insights. I'm glad you like it. You're welcome. Again, this is kind of an old one from when we did that deep dive weeks ago. Um, and, I had a really positive response to that particular, video that I did. And I kind of laughed with my fellow theorists about and said, I don't think people realize how into the weeds we get when we talk about things. And I answer your guys' questions and everything, but I think I sometimes forget that you guys aren't all on that thread. And so you don't necessarily have all the insights we have. So yeah, I'm glad that you like it. And I will try to do that more in the future. And yes, about the haircut, it's interesting that you say that about the hand and the finger under the chin. I did notice that too. And I mean, it's not uncommon for, someone who's cutting hair to do that, to angle, use the chin to angle the head so that they can get the right angle and do the cut correctly. But yeah, that is interesting to think that it might have been a little more intimate than that. I like that idea. But of course, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I do think that there's a good chance that it was shaving one part of the head in order to deal with an injury, because we've had other pictures of Norman since then. And yes, they could be later grams and that sort of thing. We're not 100% sure, but it doesn't seem like his head was actually shaved. It seems like they shaved a small portion of it for a particular reason, which might be an injury or something in the hospital, surgery, something like that. So it'll be interesting to see what it is. But yeah, I do agree with that. Okay, I need to wrap up this video, but first, because this just happened a few days ago, I'm going to talk about this. I just saw a Facebook reel with Greg Nicotero quoting that Daryl Dixon takes place 4 to 6 months after TWD ends, sharing to provide timeline context for theorizing purposes. I know lots of people have different theories about the timeline. So It's not a full timeline confirmation, but it is good to know this. So, my fellow theorists have been talking about this back and forth, and especially what was going on at the end of season 11, and maybe I'll do a video on that later. But yeah, this is really interesting. Once again, it will be interesting to see how France ties into Dead City, but that was actually the first thing I thought of, not even necessarily anything to do with Beth, because I feel like Dead City and Daryl Dixon are going to collide in some way, right? Now, because they pretty much seem to be done with both spinoffs. I'm not saying that Maggie's going to show up on Daryl Dixon or Daryl's going to show up on Dead City, but they seem to be going back to which I need to talk about too. They are going to be going back to one main show, and so it's not that necessarily we're going to see a crossover on the spin-offs, but I feel like they are conflating them so that they will be related, and we're going to find out that Dead City is happening at least somewhat overlapping with Daryl Dixon. So the point is, people were saying Dead City is way in the future. It's 10 years in the future. Why doesn't Maggie know Beth is alive? Does this show that Beth is not coming back? No. I mean, you got to understand that the kid they got to play Herschel is probably playing a part that is several years younger than what he is in real life. Okay, so we don't exactly know how old Herschel is, and they were vague about that in the same way they're always vague about timelines in the beginning because they didn't want us to know where they were going with it. But if Daryl Dixon, if I'm right, like we don't even know that I'm right about that, but because France is one of their filming locations for the next season of Dead City, I feel like there is going to be some kind of correlation or overlap. And if that is the case, and Daryl Dixon is taking place only 4 to 6 months after season 11, then so is Dead City. Or maybe it's a little bit further out so that they'll sort of, it'll be sort of on the back end of Dead City, or something like that. And that's fine. Maybe it's more like a year out, but it's not that far out. So it's just keep that in mind. It really hasn't been that long. And that should calm everybody's fears a little bit that Dead City is so far in the future that if Beth really is coming back and is alive, then Maggie should know about that. I don't think that's true at all. I think that it's pretty close to the timeline of Daryl Dixon, maybe a little bit staggered. So, really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And let me talk about the other thing too before we go. Okay, here we go. This popped up in my feed, and a new Walking Dead crossover show is finally happening. And I will put the link for this so you guys can read it. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but it is just basically saying, and it's funny that it kind of cracks me up. They keep talking about it as a crossover show, like an Avengers level type thing, where the different characters and storylines are going to cross over each other, right? And that's kind of ridiculous to talk about it that way because it's not a crossover show. It's more of a reunion show. They were together at the beginning to begin with, right? And then they went their separate ways and now they're coming back. That's not quite the same thing as a crossover. And maybe that's just me being nitpicky about what they're calling it. But I also think that it's the way that they're talking about it so that again, they're just being vague because they don't want to tell us what's actually going on. And I get that they call it that because Gimple actually said that. So this is him, right? Yeah. Yeah, Gimple said, so when it comes to something like an Avengers Endgame style all-series crossover event, yeah, I have dreams of merging all this together, and I've laid little breadcrumbs toward that, but you never know. Yeah, once again, I'm going to call BS on that. This is what they were always planning to do. Um, they had to end the flagship show because of the streaming rights thing, which I've talked about lots of times. And then they decided to do spin-offs to tell different stories specifically. And I think there might have been some sort of legal thing there, like a window. They had to wait a certain amount of time. I don't pretend to know what it was. But the fact that they were originally planning more seasons of these spin-offs and then all of a sudden cut them all off and went, oh, we're done. I think that's because they suddenly got the green light to put them all back in to a new flagship show for the series. And so they just decided, okay, well, the rest of this we're going to tell on that flagship show, and we're just going to cut it off here in terms of the spinoff. So, yeah, this is something that's been planned for a long time. Um, and now, they're just very vague about it and going, will they, won't they? And, even Gimple saying, I have dreams of doing that. No, he was full on planning to do that. He knew that would happen. This is him hinting at it without, absolutely 100% firmly confirming it. So anyway, this just kind of, it makes me chuckle, like the way that they talk about it. And I'm like, yeah, keep telling yourself that. But you guys can read through this. And the point is, it has been confirmed now. So, yeah, somebody who sent me this, they made me laugh. She said, TD just never gets tired of being right, do we? And I was like, nope, we enjoy being right very much. So anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know that, right? So Gimple, or I mean, excuse me, Nicotero has given us a timeline for Daryl Dixon, and again, I think it's important that he's giving us that now before the fourth season. I don't know why, but they are wanting us to understand the timeline at least a little bit now, where they didn't before. They would have told us this before. Now they are, and it probably is because they're moving back into the main show, and they don't want us to think that this is 10 years down the road, and you know what I mean? It's really not that far down the road. So anyway, just wanted to make sure everybody knew that we had that timeline and that the crossover show is officially happening. So, um, or reunion show. I just called it a crossover show, didn't I? All right, I'm gonna cut off there. I will do one more video because I'm nowhere near being done with asks. Um, and yeah, I will just see you then. So everyone have a wonderful week and talk to you soon. Bye.